So going off of what I was talking about earlier with some of those other teams, we got Utah. Now Utah is one of the two teams who they're not really in the best situation. They're on the worst situation. They're on the worst situation, but they're more out of the conversation for the playoffs. Now Utah, they're the 11th seed right now. I think they're about a game and a half back of that 10 seed. It might be Memphis or it might be Dallas or something, but they're a little bit off. I think it might be Memphis and Dallas. They're a little bit off of that playing spot right now. They're they're a really promising team. So even though they might not end up making the playoffs or the play-in this season, I think there's a lot of really good things to pay attention to throughout the rest of the season for this team. Recently they just had two really big wins um, against the Detroit Pistons, number one seed out east, and the number two seed San Antonio Spurs, who've been on a really hot run. They ended up breaking that winning streak of 8 games when they ended up playing them. And I think a huge part of this team that makes them so interesting is they have the potential to genuinely be, I think, one of these teams that make a huge jump um, going into these next couple of seasons. I think I've said this time and time again in my streams, but there there has been like one team or at least one team in the past 4 to 5 years who has made a really big jump from being a terrible team to a competitive team to a really competitive team in their respective conferences. I mean, again, you got Cleveland, you got Detroit, you got Houston, you got OKC and San Antonio. All teams who, not longer than 5 years ago weren't good. These teams weren't good. None of those teams were really that good that long ago, and they were able to kind of fast track some of those like rebuilding type of things that they did because they did it in a really smart way. Now some teams added people through trades like Cleveland and like San Antonio with De'Aaron Fox and Donovan Mitchell, but those other teams, Detroit, OKC, and Houston, all of those three right there, they didn't make any huge trades. They made some trades, across the outside. They didn't make any two big trades before they had their huge jump into being competitive. So you've got a blueprint from these other teams that you can be in this kind of like bad but not like terrible position and develop into a really good team. And I think there are a lot of good signs that this team could be that type of team because it feels like a blueprint to kind of follow to be one of these teams is you got to have at least one star or superstar who looks like he could be a really good player for your team for a long time ago, like your franchise guy. And it looks like Utah has two of those guys. With Laurie, he's averaging like 28 points per game. He's probably going to be an All Star for the second time. And then you got Keontae George, who I don't think Keontae George is going to be an All Star just because the guard position is so locked up in the West with Luca, um, Shea, Steph, Anthony Edwards, Devin Booker, and a handful of other guys. Jamal Murray, like it's just way too competitive. But Keontae George has played like an All Star this season. He's been averaging 25 recently, like in the past 8 or something games. He's been averaging 30. He had that really good game winner against Detroit a couple nights ago, and yeah, he's just been performing really well on this team. I don't know what year he's in, but I think he's still within like his first like 3 or 4 years of playing. So he's still a player who has a lot of room to grow too. And yeah, I just think that this team is kind of on that same track because yeah, they have those superstars. Um, Another thing about some of these teams who've done really well is they're really dominant on one side of the ball. Now, typically is defensively. Like for a lot of these teams, defense is what's been their dominant thing, and then their offense kind of catches up, and now they're a really dominant team on one side of the ball, with the other side of the ball getting really improved. Utah is kind of the exception in one of those teams where they're not a good defensive team at all. Like, they're just bad at defense. Like there's no other way to put it. They're bad at defense, but they are a really good offensive team, especially for how early into the process they are, and some of the players that they're dependent on from scoring. Like they're a great offensive team. They're built a little bit more like a LA and a Denver, where the defense isn't going to be the thing really winning you the game most nights. Most nights, it's going to be your explosive offense. And I think what's a really good sign for them is they showed it in the Detroit game where their offense was doing what they needed to do. I think they still got to 130 points, but they were able to step up their defense enough to make it difficult for that Detroit team to respond to their offense, and they came out with the win against a team who's been the number one seed in the East all season long. And I just think they've got a really good recipe to make a few changes and a few adjustments to improve their defense and be able to maintain how good they are offensively. And overall, there's just a ton of interesting players on their team that I think can provide them a lot of good things as they move into a more competitive team. Like obviously, you got the two people leading it with Keontae George and Larry Markkinen both being really good scorers. Not great defensively, but again, defense isn't really their strength. But then you got other guys too. Like I like Sensabaugh. He had a really big game a couple nights ago where he had 20, and he can be a good shooter for them. You got Walter Clayton Jr. right there. He was their draft pick this season, their lottery pick, who's not got a ton of minutes. Like honestly, Walter Clayton hasn't played too much, but he's I think a really promising player for them. Um, I think he's a little similar to Carter Bryant, where you just haven't gotten to see as many minutes from him. He's gotten more minutes than Carter Bryant, plays on San Antonio, but I think as he grows more with this team, he's going to be a really important piece for them. I've liked how Yusuf Nurkic has played, and some of their backup bigs have played, with Walker Kessler getting injured. Kyle Filipowski's, he's decent. He's decent. Ace Bailey, early into the season, Ace Bailey looked super uncomfortable. Um, I think with some of this NBA speed, but he's adjusted a little bit better as of recently. He's been scoring the ball a little bit better. He can be a really good addition for this team throughout the year, and then going into next year too. I mean, he's their number 5 overall pick. Um, and yeah, they've got a lot of Isaiah Collier. Isaiah Collier's another guard too, who he can be a little inconsistent, but the one thing I really like about Isaiah Collier is he's a really good matchup guard. Right now, he's not great at facilitating the ball or scoring at a super high level consistently. But the one thing I really like about him is he's got one of the fastest first steps in the NBA. So when you're seeing him match up with another guard, whether it's a superstar guard or not, a lot of them just can't keep in front of him. And I think once he's able to find how to control the ball a little bit better, not have as many turnovers, and kind of tighten up his handle a little bit more, he's going to be a really hard matchup for a lot of these players. And yeah, he's not on the superstar level or the all-star trajectory that you saw like someone De'Aaron Fox end up having. But a big part of why De'Aaron Fox is so good at his position is he can just get past people with just one or two move. And Isaiah Collier has that type of speed. So he's a really good addition to this team where, Keontae George, he's super athletic. Larry Markkinen, not as athletic, but really good at scoring where he needs to because of being so versatile at being 6'10". And Isaiah Collier just breaks open this game more for Utah offensively. And yeah, they just have a lot of really promising pieces, I feel like, going into the rest of this year. And maybe they could make a change, and maybe they say, is Laurie almost a little too far off the timeline for us to keep him going around, because he is, I think, closer to that 30 age than he is to that 25 age, and this team is mostly made up of guys like, Sensabaugh, Keontae, Isaiah Collier, Ace Bailey, Walter Clayton Jr., like all of these guys who are in their early to mid 20s at most. And you can see some teams kind of have issues when you got your main guy being off of that timeline. So maybe they make a decision in moving off of him and either trying to get another young player back for him and or some more draft picks. But I think they could honestly just stick with him. Like stick with Laurie and then find another way to get more pieces that are going to be valuable to this team. Because I mentioned that defensively this isn't a good team, but they are missing Walker Kessler right now, who he's one of their better defenders for this squad. So maybe as this team, in the following years gets gets a little more well-rounded, that defensive issue won't be as big of a problem. But I think what's so interesting about this team is they've been able to really compete with some of these better teams. I mentioned they beat San Antonio, they beat Detroit. I think they beat Phoenix, and they've been pretty competitive with LA. They've been pretty competitive with LA. I don't think they beat them. They've been competitive with Houston. Um, a little competitive with OKC here and there, but I just like that they've been able to match up with some of these better teams in their own conference because of how competitive it is. And I think it's just promising. It's always promising as a younger squad being able to not only keep games close, but then end up winning out like they have done, especially recently with Detroit and San Antonio. And I think it's going to be important to pay attention to how do these players develop more and more as they get more confidence, knowing that this isn't last season where they're one of the worst teams in the NBA. They're not one of the worst teams in the NBA anymore. They are a promising young team who's transitioning into whatever they're going to turn into this year. Now, this year, maybe they end up being the 11-12 seed, just barely missed the play-in, or maybe they're a play-in team who has a really tough series, and probably like 5 games, probably in 5 games against a team like OKC or San Antonio. But yeah, they might be in a position where they can have a really good playoff series against a team, get that early experience, and yeah, just get to kind of have the experience that they need with the squad this young. And I think it's going to be cool to pay attention to how does Keontae George continue to play at a high offensive level the way he has early on in the season. How does Laurie, if Laurie ends up, staying on this team, which he probably will, how is he gonna be offensively throughout the season when they have some of these different matchups? Because they've had a really difficult schedule. They've matched up with a lot of really good teams, and it'll be interesting to see if they could go on. They're probably not a type of team who can go on like a 3 game, 4 game, 5 game win streak, but can they string together a couple 2 game win streaks and move just a little bit farther in those standings, try to push in front of Dallas, try to push in front of Memphis, and get deeper into the play? And I think like a pretty hard cap for them is I don't think they're gonna end up being better than Golden State or Phoenix, because even though Golden State has underperformed, they got kind of all the elements to be not really in the same type of conversations as Utah. And I think Phoenix is just another level that Utah just hasn't seen yet, just competing one-on-one with that type of team. So I think a hard cap would be the 9 seed, but I think it would be a really big win for this Utah team if they were able to move up from being 11. I think a lot of people expected them to be one of the worst teams. I think there were some people expecting this Utah team to be even worse than New Orleans this season, and New Orleans hasn't been really good at all. So they would really boost expectations if they were able to push themselves into that 9 spot, um, into the play-in. And I just think I'm done doubting some of these teams who look like they're too early in the process. Now, championship, that's something where I'm still a little bit cautious on. Like, I don't know if a younger team can win a championship immediately. There are exceptions, obviously, but it just usually doesn't happen. But I think doubting a team to be able to make a play-in run or try to make a playoff run is something that you just can't do as much. So I'm really interested if this Utah team can maintain the success that they've had recently and continue to grow and continue to improve, because they're, I think, the most promising young team in the West that's not already a clear contender. Because you got Houston, you got San Antonio, and you got OKC. All three are younger teams who are, really blowing their expectations out the water. Like, if everything made sense, you know, OKC, San Antonio, and Houston should all be like 5, 6, 7, 8 seeds. Like, that's what they should be. Like, they should all be in that 5 and below range. That's not really how the NBA's work. Right now, all three of those teams are in the top 5, taking up 2 of the top 3 spots. And that means that Utah, I think, has some room to grow too, because they get kind of like a separate type of comparison from those other teams, even though those teams are young too. So I think this Utah team can be a really, really big surprise. Unfortunately, they're gonna end up losing against this Boston squad, but they've been competitive with them, and that's a really big deal because this Boston team has been really good this season, and yeah, I just think Utah, watch out next season. This season, I'm expecting them to be in the play-in. I think they'll end up pushing out a Dallas or a Memphis for that spot, but hey, this team is going to be really, really fun to watch throughout the rest of the season. One of the best offenses, and it looks like their defense is improving too. So, hoping Utah continues to have good things going, and I hope all of their players ends up continuing to develop as this season goes on.